Hey, I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Welcome to Essential Issues Weekly, where I talk about DC Comics 1 week after their release on the Ultra tier of the DC Universe Infinite subscription service. Each installment, I pick an assortment of comics to talk about as a DC fan and also explore what, if anything, they have to say about the essential issues of real life. Now, warning, full spoilers for everything that I talk about. Be aware this is your first and only warning that many spoilers lie ahead. This time, we're taking a look at comics originally released to the Ultra tier on June 13th, 2023. First from that group, Batman, the Brave and the Bold, #1, published May 16th, 2023. There's 4 different stories by different creative teams here, and so I'm guessing that's kind of like the format going forward. I'm not usually into that kind of book. The first is a year 1 story with detailed painted artwork, a very serious tone. It feels like very prestige type of comic book storytelling. And if it was all this, then I would really be on board. It's about the Joker's first activities in Gotham before people knew about his reputation, and so they're not seeing him as a threat initially. There's this clown who they just don't know what to make of. They just think he's some weirdo. But this story is cold and creepy and menacing, and it's got this artistic device where Joker dialogue is kind of portrayed on a black panel, just white text, I think, with a kind of ornate design surrounding it. It's you have to kind of see it to appreciate it, but it makes him feel otherworldly, because every time he speaks, they just cut away to this black frame with text on it to represent his speech, so it really takes you out and makes you feel like, ooh, there's something really weird and other about this guy. So it's great stuff in terms of its mood. I wouldn't buy this comic physically, but with DC Universe Infinite, I can justify the cost of this. Even if this is the only thing in Batman the Brave and the Bold going forward, this story arc that I'm interested in, it doesn't cost me any extra, so I'll keep reading, I think, at least just this storyline. The second story is about Stormwatch. It's a villain / anti-hero team of 4th tier characters. I really think that they needed a better intro and a story that connects to just maybe one of these characters and lets me kind of in on what they care about, what drives them. I mean, otherwise it's just these unfamiliar characters doing actiony stuff, and it doesn't really interest me. The third story is Lois tasking... Sorry, I meant to, if you're watching the video version, at least put the cover image here. I've got a lot to cover and other stuff going on in my life, and so I'm not going to get as in-depth into into the art of the books themselves. But sorry, there's the cover. Let's see here. The third story, Lois is tasking Clark with a story because she's the temporary editor of the Daily Planet, and so she's asking Clark, listen, the planet's in trouble. I need you to be the awesome Clark Kent I know you can be, and give us a great story that's going to sell papers. And it ends by teasing a mystery that I think Clark can chase as a reporter that could be cool. But the art is very simplistic, it's low detail, it's really kind of a turnoff for my tastes. I'll probably glance at panels for next time to see if it has a chance to hook me in, but if it doesn't, I think I'm just out as far as that story is concerned. The fourth story is a Batman story, and I really just skimmed through this. It's black and white art, which is not my thing. The art and costume designs also are just different enough to make me wonder if this was even in continuity, and also Batman meets 2 young boys, Richard and Jason, who are brothers. And I'm like, wait a minute, Dick Grayson is the first Robin, and Jason was also another Robin. Is this like a flashback story about them becoming their guest? I don't know what in the world I'm looking at here, because these guys are not brothers in regular continuity. So I just found it overall confusing, and I was like, I'm out. So yeah, that was Batman the Brave and the Bold #1. I'll at least be coming back around to look at that first story and its continuation. Next up, Titans #1, published May 16th, 2023. The story opens with Wally West, the Flash, dying from a bullet wound, really unusual kind of premise, and he's trying to kind of travel through time to change what happened, because otherwise he feels like it's too late for him, so he just has to change his fate or change time, and we don't really see what happens with that. We cut away to the Titans, who are stepping up as a team in the absence of the Justice League. And I like this kind of initiative. I'm really curious and open to where it goes, because I've always been familiar with these characters, with a Nightwing and Starfire, Cyborg, Donna Troy, a Changeling, aka Beast Boy, and Raven, this core group of these original Teen Titans from the 80s, now grown up and just the Titans. And so I've known about these characters for a long time. I've always wanted to really be invested in them more than I am and care about them, be interested in their power sets and stuff like that more than I am. And so I really am open to giving this book a chance, giving them the stage to really rise up and become the equivalent of the Justice League in their absence, and play that part in the DC universe, at least for a while. And it's an interesting dynamic they have going on, because they're not just a team. These guys grew up together, and so they are written and play like friends and family. There's less actual, like, real friction, but more like knowing ribbing. It reminds me of very much the dynamic between adult siblings. And that's not to say, though, that it doesn't get weighty and serious. I mean, Gar, or Beast Boy, or Changeling, or whatever they're calling him now, has a PTSD. I don't know exactly from what, maybe from something related to Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths. And then also, I typically don't like Beast Boy's shape-shifting abilities because he just turns into basically zoo animals, and I find that boring and even a little silly at times. But in this issue, he transforms into a monster or a creature, like an alien creature that I think he was recently exposed to or heard about on another planet. And I'm like, okay, great. The more Beast Boy can change into weird monsters, the more I'm going to be into him. I'm still not into him being all green whenever he does that, but whatever. Who am I to criticize as a big fan of Green Lantern? Also, Tempest, though, is not on the team, or Aqualad as he used to be called, and I am bummed about that. I think he, along with his mom, has the ability to manipulate water telekinetically, which I think is such a cool power that Aquaman should actually have. But to have a character with that kind of background and that kind of power not on this team seems like a missed opportunity. Hopefully they'll revisit that. It seems to be like he's got some stuff going on that he has to make a priority. Maybe the Titans will eventually deal with that problem and he'll be welcomed back into the fold after that's resolved. Peacemaker and Amanda Waller seem to be positioned to be the ongoing antagonists because the Titans won't get in line with the U.S. government, and I can find those characters interesting at times, Amanda Waller in particular, and so I'll be interested to see where that goes. Titans is written by Tom Taylor, whose work I've enjoyed elsewhere, like in the Injustice series of comics, and he's also been doing Adventures of Superman John Kent, which has been, pulling me in well enough so far. So I'm ready to get to know and be impressed by these characters again, especially as written by Tom Taylor, and I hope to see them rise to really that Justice League status in terms of their capability and their ability to defend the world. So anyway, that's Titans #1. Next up, Cyborg #1, published May 16th, 2023. This is the third solo series I've tried about Cyborg while catching up on DC Comics in the last couple of years. Another series that I think tries to reestablish his origins, this doesn't retell his origin story in particular, but just tries to be an onboarding point for people not familiar with the character. None of these attempts at giving him a solo book have truly hooked me, and this has honestly been the least enjoyable so far. His dad, at the beginning, is said to have died, which I'm like, oh man, that's a missed opportunity. Thankfully, he's not actually dead. I'll just go ahead and spoil that, because I think that Victor's issues with his dad provide a great source of drama. Anyway, Victor, Cyborg, is back in Detroit, his hometown, and he's dealing, of course, with dad issues, but in a different way because his dad has passed away, and so anything going on between them, the tensions between them now, he's feeling like will not be able to be resolved, really, and a lot of potential with that. The art style is more rough and at the same time cartoony than I typically like, so that is definitely a point against its ability to pull me in. I also dislike the visual redesign, where he's got more fleshy bits. He's got a hand, his left hand seems to have skin on it again, and I could be mistaken, but I thought that basically everything except for what you see of his face that has skin on it is usually covered in metal. Not necessarily because it's all been replaced, but I think I just prefer that more metallic look to him consistently across his body. And I also don't like that they're on top of his armor or his body, putting like these loose fitting clothes and stuff. And maybe they're trying to make him seem more grounded or street level. I don't know, but I'm just not into the visual redesign. But the reveal at the end is that his dad has not passed away, or if he survived in some way, it's in some sort of robotic form. It's a big tease in the last page, so we don't really know what's going on with that yet. But I think that it leaves the status quo intact of him working through issues with his dad, and I think actually leaves the book with a lot of potential. So despite the things that I was not connecting with, I do plan to give Cyborg number 2 a try and see if I can get a sense of whether or not this book is going to be for me. Moving on to Superman number 4, the Parasite issues from previous issues of this have been resolved now, and Superman now, we see in the early pages, has been working very effectively with Lex Luthor, who is behind bars, communicating with Superman via like headset. And Superman knows, though, that Lex is holding back some important information about this villain group that Lex has been warning him about, that has some kind of like a rivalry with Lex, first and foremost. But now he's saying, Superman, these guys are going to be a major threat to you now, to everybody, and so we got to deal with this. But he's also not completely opening up about who these people are and their history, their connection to Lex. Well, finally, he begins to reveal his history with these characters, and in doing so, Lex explains that he was actually a street-level crime fighter in Metropolis while Clark was still finishing high school. I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? And they showed in flashbacks, that he's fighting crime on the streets using his super tech and even clothes branded with an L. So he was full-on, apparently, like a street-level superhero. Very, very early days. And I'm not sure what I think of that. It was a pretty interesting left turn. Meanwhile, the villain group is amping up different villains like they did with Parasite. Now they're giving a similar treatment to Silver Banshee, using a combination of kryptonite and the Phantom Zone technology to kind of boost her powers in some way. I think, I'm not really super familiar with Silver Banshee. I think she has maybe supernatural origins, but I love the idea of kind of resetting her powers, resetting like what makes her what she is, and attaching it to the Phantom Zone, which has this idea of transporting people to another dimension where they're kind of in a non-corporeal state. And I'm like, yeah, that's how you do a ghost character that's going up against Superman. You in some way connect them to the Phantom Zone, So I like that idea. I hope that is where they're going. It seems to be what they're doing, but it's still unclear if that's exactly what's going on. But she bursts on the scene. She's fighting Superman. And then Jimmy Olsen intervenes and says, "Stop, Superman, stop. I love her." And that was like the big tease at the last page. And I'm like, man, there's so many weird and interesting reveals going on and changes of the status quo going on in Superman, particularly this issue of Superman right now, that I know I just have to read the next issue. I'm not sure if it's going to be really play out in a way that I find fulfilling, but I also love Superman and Lex Luthor kind of working together, and Superman realizing I kind of need to work with Lex Luthor, but I don't like this idea. There's just a lot of interesting character stuff going on in Superman right now. So I do plan to continue reading. Anyway, that's Superman number 4. The last two I really did not find very enjoyable, unfortunately. Flash 799. This is presumably Jeremy Adams' last issue. The next issue, 800, obviously going to be like a big anniversary type issue. And I don't know if he's writing that one or if that's when the new writer's coming on, but a transition is coming really soon. And I also saw in an interview Jeremy Adams talking about how he did feel like he did have to kind of rush to finish up his story arc in The Flash before moving on to Green Lantern. And certainly 799 felt very rushed, very trippy, and it felt very silly. This was an adventure through weird time, dimension, space stuff where Flash is, with a team of misfits going off to rescue his recently born infant son, Wade. Well, baby Wade is rescued. There are new kid characters introduced that Granny Goodness was trying to recruit and train or whatever, one of which is Mr. Terrific's son. And if you're familiar with the character Mr. Terrific, even decades ago when he was created, well, he's not the original. The original Mr. Terrific was like a Golden Age character, but the modern iteration was created decades ago. And out of his grief from losing his wife and his unborn son. Well, his unborn son, Granny Goodness used her time manipulation device that she'd recently, the Eternity Mind, I think it's called, that she got her hands on to rescue him out of the womb and I guess raise him on Apocalypse or something, and now suddenly he's an adolescent boy and is now a villain, or at least an antagonist of some kind for Mr. Terrific. And this is, for people familiar with Mr. Terrific, this is a mind-blowing, huge revelation, and it is just thrown in with so many other things going on in this issue. Really, it is not the proper introduction for this kind of earth-shaking thing in Mr. Terrific's life. And then there's also, after that stuff is resolved and they take these kids, I think, home with them. I can't even remember. It was kind of a blur. But as they're heading home, they don't really know exactly how they're going to get home, how long it's going to take. Flash just says, however long it takes, we're going to get home. And then they skip ahead. There's a big time gap. Flash arrives home to Linda, who doesn't understand what's happened because he's got a beard, he's wearing his red and silver costume, so stuff has gone on, time has passed, but for Linda, not much time has passed at all. So there's been some time jumpiness, and it's implied that there was some adventure that Flash went on with these characters that I'm assuming Jeremy Adams would like to, maybe has even been told that he will be able to write as kind of a mini-series at some point down the line to tell that story. But for now, Wally is home with a beard and with his red and silver Flash costume. I do like the change back to that costume. I think it's a really cool costume for Wally because it speaks to the Flash, the fact, that yes, he is the Flash, hence the red costume and the mostly traditional looking Flash costume, but his hair is exposed, and the design in other ways is a little bit like his Kid Flash costume. And so it also kind of represents the legacy and the history of the character. So I've always liked that character, that costume. I like them going back to it, but I really dislike the beard. It does not feel right at all for a speedster to have anything on his costume or face that's going to potentially be a wind drag. I know that he's got the whole friction shield that the Speed Force provides, so that's not really an issue, but I still don't like it. I think I mainly don't like beards in general. Maybe that's what's going on. Anyway, really looking forward to seeing what's going to happen in, of course, the big landmark 800 issue and going forward with the new creative team. I hope that there will still be a focus on Wally and his family. These last two issues of Jeremy Adams were lighthearted, but they were lighthearted in a way that didn't really interest me. Lighthearted in being silly, as opposed to lighthearted because we're playing with family dynamics. He was mostly mixing it up with ridiculous misfit characters that he was on this adventure with, that really didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And that's not the lightness I've enjoyed in this book. And so I'm hoping that we'll still have maybe some of that lightness. I've heard it's going to go in a serious direction going forward, but I hope it still is a nice focus on Wally, even if they bring Barry back in. Anyway, so yeah, that's the Flash 799. And then finally, World's Finest, number 15. This continues the mystery story about wealthy businessmen being kidnapped and replaced with robots, and reveals New Mazo as the villain. Not Amazo, but New Mazo, also created by Professor Ivo, the villainous creator of robotics. It also involves Ultra Morpho, another creation of Ivo, and Red Tornado and the Metal Men. Ultra Morpho, new to me. I think he's a new creation as of this comic. Red Tornado, the Metal Men, they've been around, of course, for a long time. I'm just not into these robot characters, though. Amazo sometimes can be made to seem and feel cool to me, but I'm really not into a lot of these robot characters, mostly because of their names and their designs. The Metal Men I've never been into. They tend to be comedic characters to begin with, and then also the whole idea of them as metal characters being flexible and moving like liquid. It's weird and cartoony and generally silly to me. Ultra Morpho also, I'm just like, that feels like you're jumping the shark from Metamorpho, and I don't know, it's just so kind of and New Mazo, these are shark jumping names and concepts to me. I think the art style does want to take this content seriously, but I find these names and concepts hokey personally. I imagine a lot of other readers are not going to have that issue, but I am quickly losing interest in this storyline at least. So anyway, that's World's Finest number 15, and I think those are all of my thoughts on comic books for now. I would love, as always, to get your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. Remember to check out christiangeekcentral.com for tons more content. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.